Welcome to the third part of this Introduction to Max video series. Working off of the last video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about some of the options that we have available to us when it comes to our 2D shapes. And just real quick, we'll just go ahead and touch base on this. NURBS curves are a form of splines that really haven't been updated in Max in several versions, and I personally am not a big fan of them. The splines and extended splines have more than enough power for me and geometry with edible poly and different things. NURBS curves was kind of the old way of doing things, in my opinion. The rest of the world seems to have moved away from NURBS. So just know that you probably will never see me talking about NURBS. And like I mentioned in the last video, if you want to learn about it, you have the Autodesk Max help file to get you started. Extended splines obviously are the same thing as our normal splines. They just have the same thing as our standard primitives and extended primitives. We just get maybe a few more parameters to play with, like we see here with the W rectangle. We immediately get an inner wall for the rectangle. Channels we see here, they're very quickly. There's 3 walls for us. There's an angle. So pretty, just wanted to make sure that you were aware of those things. And obviously, all of our extended extended splines have options like the extended primitives do. Just more things that you get to play with. And just wanted to make sure that I pointed that out to you. Okay, so I'm going to go back to our splines. And what I want to do here is I want to show you an additional step excuse me, that you can take these splines. For example, I talked about how splines are like the building blocks of our geometry. Well, here's a rectangle. I'm going to now go to my Modifier tab, and I'm going to open up the modifier list, and I'm going to scroll down to Extrude, and just go ahead and put an amount in there. And as you see, that rectangle with this modifier now gives us a box. Now, what is the difference between the two of these shapes? Well, this guy has limited potential as far as well, I don't even want to say that. Let's just say that the potential that this object has is very different from this object, and we'll see more of that as we go. But so let's go ahead and so we see that's another area that we can take our splines. A very typical use for something like that would be with text, and I'm just going to go ahead and we'll switch the text. Okay, and I will do the same thing. I'll put the extrude modifier on it. And there we go, we have some 3D text. We can do all kinds of things with. Text has this kerning, which we can animate. The size can be animated. So we've got lots of things we can play with as regards to splines and then just simply extruding. What I want to talk about now, though, is I'm going to go to my front view, and I'm going to kind of go back off of what we ended the last one on, which is namely how we can what we can do once we've created a spline. Now, when we draw our line out, so just keep in mind, line, spline, as you can see, they're basically interchangeable. But when we draw it out, let's say that we don't like, let's say as you're, playing around with it, that you're not really happy with the way that the S looks, or whatever it is that you're drawing. You don't have to keep trying to get it right. What we can do is we can take, once we've drawn it, we go to our modifier, and since we drew a line, we see that it's this looks different than if we do a rectangle. They're both still lines or splines, but notice when I go to the modifier tab for the rectangle, we have a different set of options here versus this one. We still have our rendering and our interpolation, but notice we have a lot more options down here. And just so you know, I can move my mouse right here when we see the cursor change, and then left click and hold, and we can drag this out as far as we need. I guess it's only going to go that far, depending on the resolution that you're using, and we can see more of what's going on. So as we see here, we have 5 rollouts, and under the geometry rollout, notice I can move my mouse to an empty spot here, and we get the hand tool, just like with our toolbar up here. We can slide this down, and we see that we've got quite a few options in here. We have some soft selection, lots of different things to play around with. So we can either keep this down here and keep sliding, or we can pull this out and jump right to things. Another thing you can do would be to simply just close rollouts and open up only the ones that you need. But those are choices that you have to you. Okay, so I want to move on. Let's go back here to our first attempt at an S. And if we come over here, we see this is our modifier stack window. If we hit the little plus sign, it expands and it shows us that we have vertex, segment, and spline as more options. Now what these represent are the sub-object components of the line. So if we click on vertex, we see it turns yellow, and it highlights here that vertex is the active sub-object, and as we see, the only things that we can select on here are the vertices. We go to segment. The only thing that we can select on is I can't pick on a vertex. It's only going to select on those segments. And then spline obviously is the whole thing. So I can go to vertice, and we can come in here and we can move. We can edit the shape. I can hit delete and get rid of that vertice altogether. You'll see that I have these handles that I can manipulate. And what's important to notice about these handles is taking a look at our gizmo here, okay, and the Y and the X. If I move right now just on the X axis, okay, and I come up here to my handles, notice I can only move it on the X axis. It's now locked just to that axis. If I come over here and move it, the whole vertex just on the Y axis, now I can only move it on the Y axis. So if I want to be able to move it on both again, I've got to put my mouse here in the middle and move it on both, and I can just move it slightly. It's just enough for it to activate both axes for us. So it's definitely something that you need to become familiar with. Okay, the next thing is types of vertices. If I select on all my vertices, we see that this guy doesn't have handles. This was the first one that I made. It's yellow. And we can see that the rest of them have these handles, because except for this one, that one doesn't either. Well, when I drew this, I drew the lines and I held the left mouse button through it and created the curves, and that by default will create a Bezier vertice. And if I right click, we see that right up here in the corner, the top left corner, we see we have Bezier checked, Bezier corner, corner smooth, and reset tangents all together. Okay, these are the types of vertices. And just FYI, when you right click, this is your quad menu, because we have 4. And this is completely customizable, and we'll get to more of this later. But for now, just we select on one of our vertices. I'm going to go ahead and select on all of them. And I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to corner. And we see that they've changed. I now no longer have those tangent handles to play around with. If I take them all and set them to smooth, we can see that they're curved now, but again, I don't have the handles to play with. The only thing I can do is move them around, but notice that no matter how I move them, they're always going to be curved in and out of each other. And if I select them again and set them to Bezier corner, what this is going to do, we see we have our handles, but the difference here is that these handles can be broken. So I can come down here and move this one like so, and then move this handle like this, and get a completely different look. So that they're broken, hence the Bezier corner. So those are the more options that we have available to us. I'm going to go into spline mode now, and I'm going to just show you some more options we have here. And we'll come down here to our outline, and I'm just going to go ahead and drag this up a little bit, and we see that it took our one spline and gave an outline to it, which I now can come in here and make pretty little adjustments to and get this shaped the way that I would like to see it, whatever. And let's say that, okay, now this is the kind of S that I want. I'll go to my perspective view, and I will go ahead and apply the extrude modifier to it. Okay, so there we go. We have our 3D shape now generated. And it doesn't have to stop here. Now that we've got the extrude modifier on it, I can come back down to line. So I click on line, we see that the extrude modifier is removed from the viewport. It's still there. If I click off the object, we see that it pops back on. If I click on the object again, it's immediately back at the top level, the extrude. I can hit this little light bulb to show it or not show it. I can hit the trash can if I want to delete that modifier altogether. Hit undo. But I can come back down to line, and I can go into Vertex, and let's say I'll go ahead and select on these two. Okay, and I would like to see my adjustments. I would like to see what they look like with the extrude still on there. Well, I come right here to show and result on off toggle, which I know you can't see toggle in the video, but just go ahead and click this button, and we can see now we're here at this level in the modifier stack, and I can move these vertices around, and I can see what those changes look like with the extrude modifier applied to it. So I can make whatever changes I want, and I can see how it would look. I'll go into wireframe for a minute, and let's talk about some more things we can do to these handles. I'm just going to go ahead and select on this one. So remember that was F3. I'm going to right click and I'm going to set this to Bezier for now, and okay, so as we see, I can play around with these handles. Okay, but there's also some more things that I can do with this. I'm in the move tool right now, and I can come over here and pick on this, but I can also access it by using the rotate tool. So I'm going to hit E for my rotate tool, and I'll rotate it like so, and we see that we're controlling, manipulating the vertices here. And notice I can also bend it in this direction, start taking it into a 3D direction, or we can come around this way, curve it out that way, so we can, you know, rotate this thing in 3 dimensions. And we can also use a scale tool, so I'm going to hit R for the scale tool, and we can scale this down, and we see that it's actually affecting the distance of the handles. I'm going to right click and go reset tangents, which takes it back to normal, so they're both sized the same. And we can rotate this again, see if we can find a cool shape. I kind of like the way that looks right there. And I think I'll do the same thing here. I'm going to reset the tangents. And I kind of like the way that looks. Okay. So those are some more controls that we have for our splines. We're trying to keep things as basic as possible at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. I'm going to reset again. And no, I don't want to save the changes. Yes, I want to reset. I'm going to show you something else that we can do and think about when we are using splines to model. Which, by the way, is why it's called Spline Modeling. I'm going to go to my front view and make it full screen, Alt W. And what I'm going to do is make a wall with a door in it, with like an archway in the wall. So I'm going to go to Create, on Shapes, and I'm going to go Rectangle. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag out a little wall right here, okay, in our front view. And I'm going to come over here and I'm going to drag out another rectangle. And I'm going to drag out a circle. And I'll go ahead and drag from right here. And about like that. So this outer line here represents the archway that I am going to try to create. What I need to do is I need to join these shapes together so that I can have just this archway that I would then put into my wall. So let's go ahead and take a look at how we can do that. I'm going to select on either one. It doesn't matter. I'll go ahead and just do the circle for now. Go to Modify, and we see it's a circle, and unlike our line, we don't have the selection, the soft selection, the edit geometry, all those different rollouts here, because this is still just a circle. We need to convert this into something that has those parameters. Namely, we need to convert it into an editable line or an editable spline. We have a couple ways we can do that. One, the easiest thing to do would just be to right click anywhere, and we can go down to bottom, convert to editable spline, and we see it's now an editable spline, which we now have all of our rollouts that we were looking for. I can also come over here to our modifier stack and right click and go convert to editable spline. We also can go to our modifier list and we can apply an edit spline modifier, which, as we see, gives us access to basically the same parameters as we did before with the editable spline. And I'll talk more about this, some of the options we have with this later. For now, I prefer to have it collapse or convert it to an editable spline. Notice we get 2 additional rollouts when they're an editable spline versus just applying the edit spline modifier that we didn't have before. So with it converted to an editable spline now, we're going to under the geometry rollout, and by the way, I like to make sure that I like to leave my selection rollout open, and we'll come down to geometry with this attach, and I'll click attach and just go ahead and pick on the rectangle, and now we can turn off attach. And so now these two, we see that they're both green now, and these are the same shape. What we have to do now is we've got to clean up this shape. So I'm going to go into segment subobject mode, and I'm going to pick on this guy right here and hit delete, and this segment and delete, and this segment and delete, and you notice we're now left with the archway. What we have here, though, we zoom in, we see that these vertices are not lining up. So what I'm going to do is just go ahead and move this guy right there, and I'll come over here, and we can move this one here, and here's where we can use some snaps that we have available to us. So I'm going to undo, and let's get these guys back where they were, and I'm going to come up here to this magnet tool, and we see it says the snaps toggle. Click and hold, it says 2, 2.5, and 3. I'm going to go ahead and say I want to snap in 3 dimensions, so we turn that on, and if I right click on it, it'll open up the grid and snap settings here, and here we can say what do we want to snap to. I want to go ahead and check snap to vertice. Okay, and we see now when I move my mouse around that the little blue highlight is showing me that it's snapping right to those vertices, grid points, which if I zoom out we see it's snapping to the grid points. I don't know if you can see that in the video or not. So I'm just going to uncheck grid points and have it just on vertice, and move it over. We see that it snaps into place. We can close this while we do that if we want to. So again, we just take that and the trick is we want to get, let's see, they're just not wanting to line up for me. I think it's because of the size that I'm at the moment. So anyway, that's just another way that we can use these snaps, or to make sure that they get on top of each other. To me, it's not a big deal. I'll show you a quick example here of some things that could be useful for. Let's say I make a box. I go into perspective view. Okay, and I want to make another box. Okay, with my snaps on, you can see that it's snapping to vertices. So I can click right here, and notice I'm snapping to grid points, and I've also snapped to so I created that vertice perfectly, starting point from that one. I personally am not a big fan of snaps until you start getting into doing some complicated thing like character rigging. But for just simple modeling, I'm not really a huge fan of it. But that doesn't mean that it's not good and not useful. So I'm going to go back to our door here and back to vertice. And again, I'm just going to move this off just so we can just kind of see what my point is here and why I'm not a big fan. Because how hard is it to select it and move it kind of close? That doesn't have to be dead on the money, because what we're going to do now is I'm going to select on both of these vertices, and if we go to our selection rollout, we see right at the bottom it says 2 vertices selected. Select all the way across, 4 vertices selected. Okay, so this one right here is just 1. It says spline 1, vertice 2 selected. Okay, so I'm just going to select on both these guys. I'm going to right click. I'm going to come down here to fuse vertices. Now notice this is also down here, fuse vertices. Well, I'm just going to do it here, fuse vertices. Okay. Now what that did was perfectly line those vertices up. So again, why I'm not really too worried about the snaps and having them lining up, because I'm going to come in here and tell them to fuse them. Now it takes the average of the two items that are being fused together and brings them perfectly in line with each other. So they might not be exactly where they should be, but I mean, looking at this, it looks fine to me. So these things you just got to play with and get a feel for yourself. If you're an AutoCAD kind of guy and you need precision, you're probably not going to be watching this video in the first place. But if precision's what you need, then obviously do it the precise way. I'm just saying this is a quick way of doing it. The precise way be actually go in, move it, and move it perfectly where it needs to be. It's a bit much more than I'm concerned with at the moment, honestly. So select it. Once they're fused together and they are perfectly on top of each other, we now need to make them one, which is we'll right click and we'll go weld vertices. And now if we select, we see spline 1, vert 3 selected. So that is one vertice now. And come over here and do the same thing. It's two vertices, right click, weld vertices. It's now completely hollow, or the same. It's all combined, welded together. If I go into my perspective view now, and let's say I'm going to put the extrude modifier on our door here on the wall, and I can do the same thing onto the door. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to right click on extrude, and I'm going to go copy, and then come over here and then right click paste. Okay, so we can see that our door is a solid shape now. Now what we want to do is we want to combine these two together. Basically we want to perform an operation where the wall is going to have this door cut a hole, or there will be a hole in the wall the size of this door. That's basically what we're going to do. And I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the extrude from this, and I'm going to delete the extrude from this. Okay, so we're back down to a rectangle and an edible spline. Now, since this is already converted to an edible spline, I'm going to come down here to attach and pick on our wall. Okay, so now they are one and the same object. And if we go to spline subobject mode, we see that we can pick on these two objects as separate entities. We can still go in and pick on segments, and we can still go in and pick on vertices. But now we have two different splines that we can pick on. So I'm going to make this wall a little taller. So I'm going to go to segment, and I want to move this up a little bit. And maybe I'll stretch this out. And I'm going to go to spline. I'm going to move this guy right on in here, right in the middle of it. And now I'm going to right click, paste, put that extrude back on there. And if I go back down to edible spline and turn our show end result on, I can now see what the extrude looks like applied to the rectangle. And notice I have my spline here of the door still selected, and I can now move this around and see what it looks like. If I go past, then it becomes two pieces again, crosses over, and now it's one and the same. And now what's cool about this is that I can hold shift and then come over here to my x-axis and then drag this out, and notice I can make a copy of it. So now I've got two doors, or it could be two windows, on this wall. Get out of spline subobject mode, okay, and hit F4, and we see that this is what the surface of our wall is looking like here. And I'm not sure how well you can see this on the video or not, but we see we've got some problems on the surface. And if I hit render, we can clearly see that this thing has some issues. So how would we go about fixing that? Well, that is outside of the scope of this video tutorial. This is just meant to show you some of the power that splines have for us. I'm going to hit undo just again to show you here. Obviously we can hold shift and keep copying these guys and moving them around and doing all kinds of wonderful things to create this shape. And let's say if I wanted to make another wall, we'll do the same thing we just did inside when we copied the spline. I'm going to hold shift and go to my y-axis. I'll hold shift and I'll move this out, and we see that it copies it. And it now says, how do you want to clone it? Copy, instance, or reference. How many copies do you want, and what name do you want to give it? I'm just going to say OK for now, and we're going to talk about this in the next video. And I can come down to Editable Spline and Show in Result and go into Spline, and now I can delete, and maybe just move this one over. So now we've got we can easily make these kinds of adjustments all day long. And that was just wanted to kind of show you some of those options that we have readily available to us. So we'll go ahead and end this this series, or this video on splines, and just kind of wanted to show you some of the things we can do with it. And the next video we'll pick up and we'll keep moving forward. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.